Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. Let's dig in. Here's what's been going on in Russia in the last 24 hours. We begin today in Moscow, where Britain, France, and Germany have once again pressed Russia on direct talks with Kyiv. On June 11th, the E3 ambassadors met Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzin. They emphasized support for President Zelensky's push for direct negotiations and reiterated the importance of security guarantees for Ukraine, including potential multinational forces, and maintaining frozen Russian assets until compensation is delivered. Moscow responded predictably, calling the European approach destructive, but the key takeaway is that Europe is slowly reasserting a diplomatic role while Russia continues to favor U.S. channels. Kyiv is also turning strategy into funding. Ukraine plans to request another $20 billion at the next Ramstein-format Defense Contact Group meeting. Officials see a 6 to 9 month window to solidify battlefield gains. The argument is that Russian advances have slowed due to Ukraine's mid-range drone strikes on logistics and long-range attacks on energy, and that prompt funding could lock in the advantage. Each contributing country may be asked to provide between $2 and $6 billion either as direct aid or loans. The spotlight remains on Crimea. Ukraine continues to disrupt Russian supply lines from Kherson, hitting bridges, roads, and overland corridors. Chandhar, Armyansk, and Stavky remain focal points. Ukrainian forces say roughly 50 Russian fuel and ammunition trucks were disabled near Armyansk, further squeezing Russian operational depth. Fuel shortages are now tangible in occupied Crimea. In Sevastopol and Yevpatoria, stations are empty, queues are long, and rationing is enforced via QR codes on the State Max Messenger app. Trucks are struggling to reach their destinations after repeated strikes. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak has called for regional fuel market forecasts to prevent shortages, highlighting that the logistic and infrastructure strain is forcing Moscow to respond to an entirely new layer of operational pressure. Ukraine is extending that pressure into central Russia. Overnight strikes on June 12th targeted Teneko and Taif-NK in Nizhnekamsk, Tatarstan, and Toliatykochuk in Togliatti, Samara region, which produces synthetic rubber used for solid fuel missiles. Nizhnekamsk canceled Russia Day public events due to the drone threat. The significance is clear. Ukraine is not just striking the front line. Critical industrial depth and energy hubs are now exposed to operational disruption. Russia is simultaneously preparing for the post-war period. Expansion and construction along its northern border, including Karelia, Pechenga near Finland, and Baltiysk in Kaliningrad, suggest a plan to rapidly project forces against NATO once the Ukrainian front stabilizes. Finland expects up to 80,000 Russian troops near its border, and former intelligence officers estimate Russia may station roughly 115,000 personnel across the broader northern border. Most of this force is tied down in Ukraine now, but the infrastructure signals serious post-war intent. Drone warfare continues to define the operational tempo. Ukrainian FPV drones now outnumber Russian FPVs by about 1.5 to 1. In May, Ukrainian unmanned systems struck nearly 180,000 verified targets and completed thousands of UGV missions, including logistics and frontline tasks. Attrition is increasingly pressing Russia. Estimates suggest Ukraine is killing or wounding more Russian troops than Moscow can recruit each month, a dynamic that is starting to bite at the strategic level. Russia's response is Rubicon, a centralized drone hub tied to the Ministry of Defense, Rostec, and reportedly the GRU. It focuses on interdiction behind Ukrainian lines, targeting drone operators, electronic warfare nodes, and supply routes. Centralization enables rapid deployment and standardization, but it also creates command and logistics vulnerabilities that Ukraine is exploiting. Inside Russia, the state is consolidating power and tightening economic control. The Duma recently passed a measure allowing the government to exceed the planned 44 trillion ruble budget without consulting parliament, including for military spending. Putin signed a law empowering the central bank, Sberbank, Rosinkas, and the Postal Service to jam, intercept, and destroy drones over protected facilities. Russia is also continuing its nationalization campaign. Authorities recently seized 550 billion rubles in assets linked to Vadim Moshkovich and Rusagro, part of a broader state takeover of 6.5 trillion rubles. Small entrepreneurs remain under pressure, with about 1.5 million patent regime businesses excluded from VAT relief. Security services are active across both counterintelligence and domestic operations. The FSB reports foiling a foreign national's attempt, recruited by Ukrainian intelligence, to assassinate a Russian Defense Ministry service member. Other cases include teenagers accused of placing explosive devices under defense industry employees' vehicles and multiple treason prosecutions. GRU officer Victor Labin was sentenced in Belgium to 5 years for illegal dual-use exports. Meanwhile, the FSB's second service is increasingly controlling Russia's internet, a move that has caused internal friction ahead of September's elections. Cyber operations are ongoing. Denis Obresko, extradited from Thailand, is charged by U.S. authorities for facilitating operations by the Russia-aligned Void Blizzard Group, which has targeted NATO members and Ukraine across multiple sectors. 11 U.S. companies are confirmed victims, and the scope is likely broader. Ukraine is also safeguarding its industrial base. The Kramatorsk machine-building ecosystem is being relocated west to Pereshin, near the Slovak border, under the Shoulder-to-Shoulder program. Over 3,500 skilled workers have moved into new factories, housing, and educational infrastructure. While relocation reduces immediate vulnerability to Russian attacks, April strikes already hit an electricity substation near the industrial park, showing the persistent reach of Russian long-range strikes. At the front line, Russian claims of capturing Roskishne in Donetsk and Okremivka in Kharkiv remain contested by Ukrainian reports. Analysts view footage of flag-raising as part of cognitive warfare, exaggerating gains. Ukraine's strikes on energy infrastructure in Donetsk reportedly disrupted water supplies to Donetsk, Yasenuvata, and parts of Makiivka. Russia also launched Iskander-M missiles and 221 drones overnight June 10 to 11th. Ukraine downed 195 drones, while infrastructure damage occurred across several oblasts. June 12th saw another wave of Russian drone attacks. Ukrainian defenses neutralized most, but civilian and critical infrastructure remain under pressure. In sum, the strategic picture is this. Diplomacy is slowly maneuvering. Kyiv is combining funding and operational pressure. Russian logistics and industrial depth are vulnerable. And northern NATO borders are being readied for post-war force projection. Drone and UGV operations are central to both sides' ability to shape the battlefield, while internal Russian economic and security measures reflect a state reinforcing its control under sustained operational and political pressure. Thanks for listening. We're building something special here, and you're part of it. If you haven't yet, leaving a review or a quick comment goes a long way in helping others find the show. And if you want to go deeper, we publish a daily intel brief on Substack at restrictedhandling.substack.com, covering Russia, China, Iran, the Middle East, and the DPRK in more detail. Take care and have a great weekend.